No.
We tried to do Facebook Live like a month ago, and it's too difficult for us to figure out. I feel like a boomer.
This is the first time we've ever had any issues. We did them last summit and this summit, but now it keeps blocking my Facebook account for some reason. You've been temporarily blocked from performing this action. Right. Okay, Nick. I think we'll continue with it anyway, and then we will share the recording with everyone.
Great.
I know we won't get as many live questions, but we've had tons and tons of questions already up front. So let's go through those, and then yeah, we'll do that. So first of all, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've been having a really fun time participating in the summit.
Definitely. And yeah, lots of good speakers so far. So it's been very interesting and lots of feedback. And you had your presentation was yesterday. Had any feedback from it yet?
So far, so good. People like the approach. It seems to resonate.
Excellent.
No one's sent me hate emails yet.
Yeah. So for today, Nick, as I said, we have quite a few questions that have come in from people. So just before we get started, would you mind sort of just telling everyone a little bit about your background and so on, and how you ended up where you are?
Yeah, definitely. So like you mods, I spent my career outside of SEO, and I built my career doing other things. And I switched to SEO 3 years ago after being in primarily sales-oriented roles. And since then, we've, myself and my organization have taken 4 projects from 0 to 100,000 organics a month. The fastest hit 100K a month in 8 months, and the biggest is doing over 500K a month. Yeah, we're hoping to do a 10 million visitor a month project, in the next year.
Excellent. That sounds very adventurous.
It certainly is ambitious.
So generally, I mean, when we look at content, right, there's many strategies and there's many ways generally to approach it. Like how do you approach Google, and how do you approach sort of the whole content aspect of it?
Yeah, definitely. So through taking these projects from 0 to 100K, I've learned a lot. And our approach to Google today involves 2 things. First is every page of content we publish, we strive to be higher quality, more comprehensive, and create more reader value than any other page Google could show. And then we do that at scale and publish hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages per month. And so, our approach to Google is we want to be everywhere in the buyer persona's funnel and hit them multiple times before they're ready to make a purchase.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. What are sort of your unusual aspects? Because like I've seen a lot of your sort of case studies and so on that are really interesting. So what are the things that you don't typically do when you're approaching a SEO project?
Yeah, definitely. So I think our approach to Google is fairly unique because we approach it in a non-standard SEO way. If you look at our organization, there's like 23 people that don't know SEO and didn't have any SEO experience when they came in, and there's myself and our SEO director who joined the company a couple months ago after we already crushed all these projects. And I saw a recent post by Tim Sulo, and he's like, at Ahrefs we don't use TDIF, we don't do keyword density, we don't care about golden ratio, we don't care about all these things, and despite that, we're able to get great outcomes. And that's the same for us too. Is we don't do 90%, 95% of the things that you're going to find in an article like backlink us 250 ranking factors.
Cool. And how did you actually get started with this tool? I mean, because I've had the pleasure of testing out like Cluster AI and this sort of keyword grouping tool that have been super helpful for us. So how did you get started with that in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. So I learned SEO by joining an SEO company to run sales and marketing. And that SEO agency developed the kind of the concept while I was working there. And they had a mentor. Maybe you've heard of her. Her name's Jillian Music. She's the founder of Moz.
Yeah.
Rand Fishkin's mom. And so Rand Fishkin's mom, Julian, was mentioned. She told them, a lot of SEO agencies try and pivot to creating tools for other SEOs, but it's a struggle for them. And a lot of SEO agencies aren't able to effectively switch from marketing from clients to other agencies. And so they never pursued it. And so when I left, they did a little bit of consulting for me and helped me get the tool up and running. And so I've been using it internally at Content Distribution for a couple of years, and I spent the last year making it publicly available. We launched in September, and now, we have customers from Fiverr, from Kajabi, from Thinkific, from CarMax, Hootsuite, and so, I think it's 2021, and as we go forward, we're going to see more and more software like Cluster AI to automate the keyword research process, because it's still manually done by most people today.
Yeah, and a lot of work it is. So cool. So when you generally take your approach to SEO, and because I've seen like many of the clients that I've seen case studies with, it haven't been typical SEO companies, right? So how have you generally been able to work with a company and all these sort of more non-SEO people and really get so great SEO outcomes? Like what's sort of been your approach in terms of that?
So is the question, how do I get clients?
No, more in terms of like with your sort of SEO approach, right? Many of the companies that I've seen case studies that you work with haven't had much SEOing done before, right? So it seemed like you go in and work with people who have never looked at SEO, and you literally get very good results straight away. So like, how do you manage to do that?
Yeah, when you look at the biggest bottlenecks to success, it's going to be two places. The first is how long content sits on your content calendar for. And for me, I might have content on my content calendar for 8 months before it gets written and published. The second thing is, once you publish, how long does it take to rank? Those are your two biggest bottlenecks. It takes so long to create content systems that can consistently bring content from A to Z and publish it, versus things like technical SEO. When you make a technical SEO change, you generally see the change unfolding over the course of 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks. But it ends up happening a lot quicker than the time it takes to get impact from ranking. And so we prioritize and go into any project trying to publish and hit the ground running with as much content we can get out the door as quick, as soon as we started the engagement. And then we'll worry about technical SEO, once we've published 100 pages. Because ultimately, if we can lift traffic 10 or 20 or 30%, that investment into technical SEO we made is more valuable if we have 100,000 visitors a month than if we have 10,000 visitors per month. So we get the content systems going, get the content out the door, and while the content's maturing, then we can circle back and focus on technical SEO, but we've parallelized the work. And so as we're doing technical SEO, the content's becoming more and more and more mature. But if you start with technical SEO first, you don't have that parallelization, and there's no maturation if you spend 1, 2, 3 months in technical SEO phase.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Mark is asking a question here. I found your page efficiency interesting. Do you track how many pages you publish, get less than 10 searches? I think average are not as interesting as the median, and 30 to 40% of content bombs.
Okay, so So to explain for everybody, the traffic efficiency score is a score that measures how much traffic you generate per month per page of content. And let me go ahead and share my screen here, and I'll kind of show you what it looks like in an average industry.
Yeah.
Share screen. Don't show these tips again. Here we go. Are you able to see, mods?
We don't see the screen now.
Click share
No.
screen. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm just trying
what?
to check if you.
I shared it in the other window. Here we go. This should work.
There we go. Yes, now we see it.
Okay, great. So we have the domain, we have the estimated traffic, we have the DR, the number of pages, and the traffic per page per month. And the thing you'll notice here is that there's a very narrow band of efficiency that the top players in the pet space have. You know, when we're looking at the biggest websites here, you know, on the low end, the website's generating 170 visitors per month per page. And on the high end, it only goes up to 872. And so what we see is that there's like a 1-to-1 correlation between pages published and how much traffic you get. There's no one that generates 80% of the traffic with 20% of the volume. Now, with that said, I've generally found Ahrefs data to be, you know, we've definitely had some keywords that, you know, indicated there's 100 searches a month and we got 20,000. And so, you know, we'll go all the way to the bottom. And even if Ahrefs indicates there's not a lot of search volume, it's especially in the B2B space, you know, there absolutely could be, despite what Ahrefs indicates.
Right. Cool.
You know, in terms of you know, how many pages go on to generate over 10 visits per month, you know, it's not 10 visits per month isn't a metric that we've looked at, but we've looked at maybe 100 visits per month, and it's, you know, it's more than half. I forgot what it, maybe 60, 70, 80%, something like that.
Nice. That is pretty good. Okay, so the next question. So for people who are looking to use cluster AI, right? How do you really use the deliverables to optimize on page? And is there any kind of formula, any kind of system for that?
Yeah, definitely. So one of my approaches to Google, you know, the key to my approach to Google is the scale part, you know, the quality and the scale. But when you're publishing at scale, you know, keyword research becomes, and on-page optimizations become very difficult. You know, you end up needing a whole team of SEOs to traditionally do these activities. And I think cluster AI is really foundational in allowing us to create so much success with a team of non-SEOs, because it allows you to do formulaic things, including on-page optimization. So when we look at the deliverables that we get back, with a kind of template, we can allow a non-SEO to do optimizations good enough to rank in position 1. So the deliverable that we get back looks like this. We have a main keyword. We have all of the variations of the main keyword, and we have the total search volume that this page can capture. And every variation has at least 3 results in common with the main keyword. And every main keyword has 2 or less results in common with any other main keyword. So there's high overlap with every variation in the main keyword, and there's very little overlap between main keywords. There's no cannibalization. Yeah. And so what this formula looks like is the URL is always the main keyword. You know, whether it's prison pen pals, inmate calling, right, a prisoner, it's just the main keyword with dashes instead of spaces. The H1 includes the main keyword plus something creative. The meta description includes the main keyword plus something clickbaity. The H2s include variations of the main keyword in about 40 to 60% of the H2s. We don't want to over optimize and put a variation in every H2. We generally go for a 40 to 60%, maybe 70% ratio. Mm-hmm. And then when you're doing the optimization process, your editor is replacing, when the writer overuses the main keyword, they can just come in and sprinkle any of these variations throughout the H2s in the content. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happens in our organization is our editors who don't know SEO follow the template, and they're able to take a writer who doesn't know SEO, and together these two people who don't know SEO create rankable content.
Cool. Yeah, that seems like a good framework, right? And it is always challenging when you're working with writers and editors and sort of get up their SEO skill pretty well. So
yeah,
right.
what we look for is great writers. Great writers first of all.
What does your system look like in terms of because you're obviously pushing out hundreds of pages, right? So what kind of system and what does your sort of CMS look like, or how do you actually manage all these huge batches of content?
Yeah, I'm pretty proud of our sophistication because I think it enables us, a small team, to create as much content as a major publisher like TechCrunch or New York Times or Wirecutter or Vice. I think we're publishing in a similar ballpark as some billion-dollar media conglomerates, and I think it wouldn't be possible unless we had really intense focus on just optimizing every step of the way. And we use Airtable, and we found that Airtable, as opposed to most CMSs, fits our workflow like a glove, where other CMSs require us to change our workflow to fit how they work. And so if you're not already using Airtable, it's like Google Sheets on steroids. And so the process kicks off from our import screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring in the keywords that we discovered in the opportunity analysis. So let's say we're going to take these 4 keywords and we want to create content about them. I'm going to paste it in here. And you'll see that we brought over the main keyword, the search volume, and all of the variations. And then once I assign the project, Airtable actually creates a Google Doc for me. And this Google Doc is what the writer is going to end up writing in. And the Google Doc has everything that the writer needs to understand who the company is, what their products are, the buyer persona, how the buyers are feeling when they're making the searches, brand guidelines. It also has more information about this particular product in general that helps people with their tax assessment. So this Google Doc was automatically created. It includes this table because we need the writers to confirm that they've met our writing requirements when they submit content. And then it has any of the variations that Cluster AI found. And so the writer will write directly into here. And this allows us to track the status of every page of content that we've ever published on any device at any time. And so, yeah, you see we basically track things like the author, the status, the first draft due date, who the editor is, and then we'll have all the metadata stuff like the meta title and the meta description and the title and, who's doing QA, etc.
Cool. That's nice. So yeah, good setup. I mean, we've been there ourselves. It can definitely be a headache to keep track of everything. So that looked like a solid system.
It's, things just start breaking at the edges when you're scaling up. Things like before we had to manually create Google Docs for every page of content. And we had to stress about whether the virtual assistant we hired even did it. Did they do it right? Did they check in and remember to tell us that they did it? Oh, their family member's sick again. And so, we created a Zap. It's like 12 steps. It took me 2 days to figure out in kind of R&D. And now we don't have to worry about creating Google Docs anymore. It's all automated. And so we're just constantly looking for small tweaks to remove tedious manual overhead of manual labor.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And how, I mean, you're obviously scaling this stuff. So how do you keep the quality high? Like, obviously, I could see your framework and your templates and so on definitely helps to get the basic right. But with all this content, like, how do you make sure that the content quality is consistent?
It's really tough. The easiest thing to do when you're scaling is for your team to let things slide. If you're an editor in an organization that's scaling, the easiest thing you can do is give the writers a pass, because the less you do, the easier everyone's job is, especially when people start getting overworked. These edge cases start adding up, and the efficiency goes down. The team's going to have to make decisions on what they're going to give up in order to hit your business goals. So you need to be cognizant of the fact that your team's going to say yes, even though they don't have the capacity to hit the thing you just asked them to do. And the way that they're going to be able to try and meet it is by letting quality slide. And there's a really particular type of person that I feel like won't let things slide. And at our organization, our editing team doesn't let things slide. And what they look like is, they're based in Eastern Europe. These people have been speaking and consuming English media for their entire lives. They went to school to study English literature. They got a master's degree in English literature, and they went on to be an English teacher, teaching the citizens in their country how to speak English. And I think when someone spends 6+ years in school studying English and then goes on to teach English, that it's in their soul that they just can't have. They wouldn't be proud of what they do if they let good content go out the door. And so I think because we've found these people who've dedicated their lives to the language, that they're inherently elitist about content, because they spend a lot of pain and tears learning it, how to do it well.
Makes sense. So Mark, I have another question here. Any cluster AI strategies you would recommend specifically for e-commerce stores? So product pages, category pages, etc.
Yeah, so when people think about ranking, oftentimes I hear about these couple keywords at the bottom of the funnel that they want to rank for. And really you have to consider the whole buyer's journey and how can you get in front of those people, regardless of where they are. If you look at the way that people buy products, if you can educate them, for example, if it's a fitness product and you're able to, get them the fitness information they need when they search for it, you now have awareness and you're much more likely to be purchased because you're being considered, where previously they didn't know you existed. And so what we've seen is that, it's also a lot easier to rank at the bottom of the funnel when you have content at the middle and top of the funnel supporting it and internal linking down to it. An internal link, I think, works in the way that people think backlinks do. It really powers up a page, and we see a lot of benefit from driving dozens or hundreds of internal links at a particular, at bottom of the funnel page. The other benefit is that when you approach Google from a scale perspective and you're constantly publishing, your campaign doesn't rely on ranking 1 or 2 pages at the bottom of the funnel for your campaign to be successful. And so, while you're tackling those more difficult bottom of the funnel keywords, it might take 6 or 8 or 12 months to get page 1. But in the meantime, in month 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you can be racking up wins higher up in the funnel. And so your campaign can still be successful before those bottom of the funnel keywords hit the first page. So, do your opportunity analysis. And then, when you're looking at the opportunities, consider all of them, be everywhere.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And we had a similar question here from Mesodin, who was saying the importance of internally linked cluster on content. So I guess how do you go around internal links, and what's sort of the strategy you use with all this content?
Yeah, definitely. So while we're preparing, so we try and basically silo our content into silos with anywhere from 3 dozen to hundreds of pages of content. And while we're preparing kind of the silo overview or the content series template, as we call it, we know, our strategists have a good idea of what the bottom of the funnel keywords are. And so we're going to call these out, and we're going to put in, maybe 3 to 7 bottom of the funnel landing pages that every page of content needs to link to. And then we also give the writers a framework for going into our library of content and finding other relevant things to link to, naturally within the content. And so any article might have anywhere from 7 to 20 plus internal links.
So are you very consistently focusing on it from a silo structure, or like what's sort of your mindset around the internal links?
We'll call out the important pages, and then we'll give the writers a framework for naturally linking to content that a little bit more dynamically than we can plan from the top.
Right. Okay. So can cluster AI help with on-page optimization?
Yeah, I think we just covered that a couple minutes ago, pretty in depth. But every person in my organization who's optimizing has never optimized content before their role. Oftentimes when they step into the role, they really don't understand, what they're doing when they're implementing this template. But a month goes by and you'll see that even though they just joined the company, their content's now ranking.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Then there's another great question here. How do we split test different content templates?
Oh man, I mean, split testing in SEO is like the hardest thing ever. How do you eliminate all variables except for one? And it ends up being really expensive and takes a long time. So, I don't know if it's possible.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Then there's a very short question here: user intent versus speed factors.
Versus speed factors?
Yeah.
I think both are important. So, earlier in the conversation, I discussed and I mentioned that my approach to SEO doesn't include a lot of things you would consider SEO-y. One of my taglines is like, this and this outcome without technical BS. But the truth is there's a little bit of technical BS. And, one of the things that we care very deeply about is site speed. We believe that user engagement metrics impact, ultimately rankings. Maybe we can go into why we believe that, in the next couple questions. But, user intent is number one. But if your site is too slow, everything else that you do is going to be minimized. But like I said earlier, focus on the content production systems, focus on getting the content out the door, and then your investment into improving site speed has a higher ROI because there's just more lift that you're going to get than if you didn't have that content.
Totally make sure. That makes sense there. So last time you spoke a lot about sort of recruiting writers and so on, but I've had quite a few questions about sort of writer recruitment and where to find writers and like how do you go around that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. What I see is that content writing is one of the things that most SEOs outsource. I would say 90% of SEOs probably don't have in-house content writers. And so, I kind of see this Venn diagram of like SEOs and people who publish a lot of content. And the people who publish a lot of content, don't know SEO and can't rank it. And SEOs who can rank stuff, rely on external content writers. The trick is when you're first starting is while you're unsophisticated, or at least your processes that are documented are unsophisticated, you want to bring in more talented writers to make up for that lack of unsophistication that you currently have. But over time, as you get more sophisticated, you can bring in less and less experienced and talented writers into the system and have them produce great content and great outcomes. Start off with freelancers. And the goal is that you want to touch as many freelancers and work with as many freelancers as possible, because what you're looking for is your first hire. And this first hire is going to turn into your editor and later your content manager, who's going to be managing all the writers underneath them. And, one of the things that you can't teach is passion for great content. And so the more writers that you work with, you can find the people that are ultimately not going to let bad content go out the door, the people that are the most detail oriented, the people that follow your directions the best, that have the most aligned values, that are the most consistent. Then you're going to make them and bring them in-house. And then once you have this really strong content manager, you can begin hiring those less experienced, writers that maybe aren't as sophisticated as freelancers. And when you start bringing in your content team in-house, you might bring your per word cost down from like 5 cents a word to less than 2. And this is a really powerful thing to do, because content cost is a competitive advantage. If my content cost is half as yours, it means I can publish twice as much content for the same budget. And when you're looking at the top players in the space and your opportunities measured in thousands of pages, content cost becomes very important over the long term. But if you go straight from working with in-house writers, you're not going to have the systems. They're not going to be supported for them to be successful in the early phases of your scale. We find these writers, the freelancers in Facebook groups. There's a lot of talented people out there, Americans that are now living in low cost of living countries like Thailand or Indonesia, Bali, or the Philippines. And a lot of these people teach English, or they're like marketers and they're like pretty smart, but they haven't really made it yet. And they're only making like $1,000 a month, and they're not really meeting their financial goals. These are great people to hire as content writers.
Excellent. Yeah, I love that advice, and I think that's very similar to what we would typically be doing as well. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, that's excellent. And the next question: how long does it typically take before you see any traffic start coming in? So I think, there's two kinds of sites you work with, I guess. So there's existing companies that haven't done much in SEO, and obviously if they have an existing website or been around for a long time, I assume the impact would be higher than if you start a brand new website, right? But from your point of view, like what is the sort of time it takes before you start seeing sensible traffic?
I think off a fresh domain, it can be a while. So I will work with clients with established businesses, or I'll create my own fresh project from scratch and in-house. And the results have varied wildly. So on one project that we grew internally, we went from 0 to 100K in 13 months in the pet space for doggypedia.org. But we recently did another content site on a fresh domain, and we're at maybe 3,000 visitors a month in month 12. And the difference between these two projects is, basically brand marketing. For the first one, we did a lot more brand marketing. I created a YouTube channel that got over 1 million views. I created a Pinterest account that got 65 million impressions and 70,000 link clicks. I was figuring out growth hacks to drive referral traffic from Facebook to this project. And in the second one, it was in the travel space. COVID hit, and I completely abandoned it, and haven't touched it since March of last year. And I did no additional brand building. And I've seen a very, very heavy correlation between general brand building or web presence and outcomes. And I can do the same work on 2 different projects, and the people that get more referral traffic, they get more branded searches, they get more referral visitors, they get more email visitors, they get more return visitors, they get higher conversion rates. Those guys will take the same amount of content and get twice as good results as the guys that aren't doing those things. And I think, I think it just makes sense. There's a lot of competition for the SERPs, and I think, kind of brand activity or brand visibility is a good way for Google to kind of figure out who's serious and who's not.
Yeah, and it ties in, like what we always look a lot at is what is external traffic you get to your website that isn't organic, right? Because I think if you have a website where you're 100% relying on organic traffic, it's hard for Google to kind of justify more traffic, right? Whereas if they can see you're getting a ton of traffic from and obviously they can do that stuff. But if you're getting that from, I mean, that could be Facebook groups, as you say, Pinterest or YouTube,
Exactly.
or God knows what, right? Like again, that it's just more justification for Google to actually rank you.
So here's my theory. Google discovers 1 billion new pages every single day. They update probably several billion more in their index. And many of these pages, I would say as many as 80% will never get a single human visitor. And so for Google, the fact that this page receives referral traffic is something that very few of the pages will ever receive. And so it's kind of like, hey, it's kind of like a signal of popularity. Like the restaurant over there has a line out the door. I should take them seriously. They now have the Google Analytics data and the user engagement behavior to understand how well you could potentially treat the visitors that they send you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So in terms of how long it takes to rank, on a new site, it can take a long time. But on a once you're in authority mode, you can rank, like I've seen, the next day, literally, and it can be very short. You can, we consistently rank very, very quickly, and so it's really hard to kind of, give a ballpark.
Yeah, I think that's great, Nick. So the next question is around content, and basically, Joanne here have been asking, do you use Surfer SEO or similar content optimization tools?
Yeah. So what we've seen is that a majority of the Cluster AI customers also use some sort of on-page optimization tool, and it's very often Surfer. We don't use Surfer, but I'm a big fan of Michael because of how he shifted the conversation from off-site into on-site, because it totally aligns with how I think Google works too. We haven't had to learn how to use it, and what that means is that when we started doing SEO, the things that we were doing worked, and we've continued to double down into those things. And I think if our campaigns stopped progressing or we hit a certain wall, we would have begun to investigate things like backlinks or maybe more tools or a different way to approach Google. But the thing is that things have just not slowed down or stopped. And so, we just never got around to implementing a tool like Surfer. And I think one of the things is, because we've been able to template out the Cluster AI deliverable into very concrete optimizations, that we've been able to get away without it.
Makes sense. There's a question here. So what are channels outside of organic SEO that you like to use to get some extra traffic and authority to help your SEO?
So for client projects, I tell them that this is their responsibility to do this. For my projects, you got to growth hack it, and it's super different for every single project that you work on. One of the things that makes the reason I don't provide it to clients is because it's not replicatable or scalable. It really does take some creativity to figure out how you're going to exploit the target audience, what platforms they hang out on, the kind of content that engages them, and how you're going to bring them into your content assets. And it'll be different from a pet site to a travel site. There's two. All right, I'm going to give away a pretty cool growth hack here. So similar to Google, what we've seen a lot of success with on Pinterest is by publishing more. And so, the way that we got those 65 million Pinterest impressions was by posting thousands and thousands and thousands of pins every single month. And so what you want to figure out is a way, basically some sort of library that consistently updates images in your niche. And then you want to set up a Zap that grabs them and pushes it to Pinterest. And 65 million impressions, 70,000 link clicks, and I think it could have been a lot better if we put more time into it. Another one is YouTube. The way that I grew this YouTube channel from 0 to 1 million viewers over the course of, I think, 18 months with only 6 videos is I kind of reverse engineered the search results. I figured out what videos create the most traffic in the pet niche. It's videos of dogs barking that makes your dog react. And I saw that a lot of them were 5 minutes and they were focused only on one dog. So I created one that's 15 minutes focused on every breed. There's 27 breeds barking in this video, because I thought it would lead to longer user engagement than a shorter video with less dogs. And I was right, it worked really well and drove a bunch of clicks. Go to Reddit, figure out what Facebook groups your audience participates in, and you just have to get creative and understand how the algorithm works on any platform, which is to drive more engagement, keep people longer on site, and if you can create content that drives that, the platforms will promote you.
Excellent. Yeah, lots of good tips. Lots of good tips. What is your process for updating existing content?
Actually, we're pretty unsophisticated here. I think one of the challenges at the scale that we work at is when a page decreases in volume, traffic, did it decrease because of, decreases in impressions, right? Or did it decrease because we lost rankings? And right now, like across thousands of pages, it's very difficult for us to kind of filter out the noise from the pages that are losing traffic due to lost impressions and just, seasonal search volume. So that makes it difficult. The other thing is, it goes back where our campaigns have been generally successful and grow week over week and month over month. And so we just never had to get around to circling back and hitting old content. Our approach to Google is we take so many shots on goal that if 60 or 70% hit the first page, then the campaign is ginormously successful. And so we don't expect everything to rank. But I totally think there's value in becoming more sophisticated here, because you end up spending a lot of money on content, and every piece should, you should give it the best chance it has. So I would say I'm not the expert here, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, we definitely do a lot of content updating as well, generally, right? And the way I love to look at it is particularly, like, even with cluster AI, like, you always end up ranking for keywords you never expected, right? Or you end up, there's a ton of traffic from keywords that you didn't expect to be a ton of traffic from, right? So
yeah,
luckily in GSC, you often get some good data in terms of that and so on. So we sometimes look at the sites where we feel that, either there's a ton of keyword coming from words we didn't expect, or we maybe didn't even include in the page. So we have someone that would generally look for like those kind of opportunities, and then get writers to, like, add sections or add particular keywords and so on. But again, yeah, it's not extremely systematized. So
it's tough because the SEO who's like doing the analysis isn't writing the content. What I found is that a lot of SEOs who are from abroad and not from English speaking countries, they either speak English great or they don't know SEO. Pick one. And so it's tough. But yeah, so the framework that we're starting to use is Steve Toth's framework that he communicated in the SEO notebook note. And it's just like you said, mods. It's going to Google Search Console. It's looking for keywords on maybe bottom of page 1, 2 or 3 that you might have not optimized for, including the content, and then just bringing those keywords in.
Yeah, and I think that's if people aren't signed up to Steve Toth's SEO notebook, definitely recommend it. Always so many golden nuggets coming out from that.
Absolutely.
Right. So I've written a bunch of solid content. It's not ranking and literally gets 0 traffic. Should I consider removing it?
I don't know. There's a lot of things that could be going wrong here. How much is a bunch? If you publish 10 pages or 20 pages, and you're on a fresh domain, you launched a month ago, maybe you're not surprised. So SEOs like to say it takes a long time to rank, and that can be true, but it doesn't mean that you can't hold your SEO or yourself accountable starting on day 1. So the first thing you need to hold yourself accountable to is, did you do the work? It sounds like you at least did some of the work. The next thing is, even if you're not generating traffic, you can still watch the momentum towards the first page. Every week and every month after you publish this new content, you should see new keywords being associated with the website in Google Search Console. And if that's not growing, you have a problem and something's wrong. You should see these keywords come in around pages 7 to 9 and start progressing towards the first page. And then over time, you should see more keywords. And then over time, you start looking at traffic. And then over time, you start looking at conversions. And so through the life cycle of a campaign, you can begin, seeing progress in as little as, day one. Did you do the work? And then weeks, is that work getting new keywords? If it's not, like, I don't know, did you build some crazy backlinks, or are you competing in like cancer lawsuits? I think we need a little bit more details to give you something more actionable than looking Google Search Console.
So, so the next question here is about skyscrapers, and basically she's asking, do you still do skyscraper content that's extremely long, or do you keep all articles at like the competitor size?
Yeah, so we don't, we haven't really used the skyscraper strategy. If we're competing from a place of weakness, meaning most of the websites that are ranking are stronger than us, then one of the easiest things that we know that we can do to be competitive is write more content. More content is going to keep people on the page longer. There's more chances for internal links to send them to other pages. There's more chances to convert. And all things being equal, 2,500 words will take people longer to consume than 1,000. And and so when we're approaching from a place of weakness on a fresh domain, we're trying to have more words in the competition, more H2s, more internal links, more external links, more pictures, videos, tables, lists, bullets, etc. When we're in authority mode, we can publish 1,200 words, 800 words, and it'll rank just as well. So the weaker you are, the more best practices you have to implement to be competitive with the people that are just naturally ranking because they're in authority mode.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And then this question was kind of what we covered before. So, what's the amount of time you spend creating new content versus updating old content? So
99% to 1%, maybe even less than 1%.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense.
But like we said, we could be better. So don't ignore it.
Yeah. So here's a Cluster AI specific question. So in regards to Cluster AI, how difficult is it to teach someone how to use?
I love that question. So Cluster AI is really cool because it completely removes the need to know SEO to do world-class keyword research. And because it simplifies keyword research into basically a vocabulary exercise. How strong is your vocabulary? So when we're using Ahrefs, our approach to kind of keyword research is different than you would be if you're not automating keyword research. And when we use the main keyword feature, we're looking to go as broad as possible, and we basically want to understand. We think, okay, so let me back up. This product that we're looking at for Do Not Pay helps people communicate with people in prison. You can snap a couple selfies, take some pictures of your kids, either write a text or take a picture of a handwritten note, and Do Not Pay will actually mail a physical mail to the person in prison. And so we want to get in front of people that are searching Google for how to talk to people in prison. That's our target audience. If you're trying to communicate with someone in prison, we want to educate you that we have a product that will make it easier to maintain strong bonds with your loved one who's currently incarcerated. And so we think people that are searching for prisoner communication will always use one of these words: inmate, inmates, prison, prisoner, prisoners, or prisons. And the thing that you'll notice is that I don't know if people use inmate or inmates, or prison or prisoners, or prisoner. And so we want to go as broad as possible to figure out all of the different ways that our target audience is searching. And what we get back, is pretty broad. We get back 2 million keywords. And clearly, things like prison break aren't very relevant to the audience that we're trying to get in front of. And so we're going to use their include feature. And this is where the vocabulary exercise comes into practice. We want to think about every word that someone might use to communicate with some sort of inmate or prisoner. And so we found 34 keywords that relate to communication. We have communication, we have letter, we have letters, message, messages, chat, chatting, talking, talk, phone, phone calls, text. And you'll see that we get every variation of the keyword. Because again, we don't understand if users are using text a prisoner, texting a prisoner. How do I send texts to a prisoner? We want to catch all of that. And so once we do the vocabulary exercise, we'll get a bunch of keywords here. We'll export the list. And when we're importing into Cluster AI, one of the things that we can do is we can add our Ahrefs URL. And the Ahrefs URL actually contains all of the data. All of these include keywords are stored in the URL. And so the person that did it who doesn't know SEO goes through all the variations, they pop in their Ahrefs URL, and now we can QA, did they hit everything? Did they use letter, letters, message, messaging, chatting, etc.
Very interesting. Yeah, I like that approach. And I mean, we have actually often gone the other way around. So very often we have done the keyword research and then we use exclude instead. So we look for all the stuff that's not relevant, right, and try and exclude that.
That's an approach we take too, depending on how big the niche is.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, we definitely had some, like we had a website in the horse riding niche.
Yeah.
And apparently there's a lot of keywords in the horse riding niche that you don't want included. So.
And I just realized I wasn't sharing my screen, and so I just kind of want to show what that looks like and how we have the core variations up here, and then we have all 34 of these things that we think people use when they try and attempt to find information about communicating with inmates and prisoners. And then this was the, this is the Ahrefs link that that Cluster AI stores that allows you to QA the people that are doing your keyword research.
Yeah. Excellent. So the next question here, Nick, is about budget. So this guy is saying, I only generally have budget for doing 5 to 10 pages of content a month. Is your approach, or is Cluster AI, the method here, still relevant when you haven't got the opportunity to publish more content?
Yeah, I think when you look at most SEO campaigns, 10 pages a month is actually on the higher side. I worked at an SEO agency, and we might create 1 page of content per month per client. And so 10 is actually pretty decent. And over the course of a year, you're going to be able to publish, somewhere between 60 and 120 pages of content. And your outcome isn't going to be as good as someone who has a budget for 1,000, but your outcome is going to be better than someone who publishes 6 landing pages and stops there. Yeah. So absolutely, you should do it. The best time to start SEO was 3 years ago, and the next best time to start is today. So
excellent, love it. Okay, and it's also Cluster AI specific. So with Cluster AI, when you get the outputs, do you just start from the highest volume and go down? Or do you find any other way to prioritize what to write about first?
Yeah, there's multiple approaches. Typically, the higher the volume, the more competitive, but the bigger the payoff. We're taking so many shots on target that we're gonna publish, let's say, 50 or 100 prisoner communication articles. We're just gonna start from the top. If you're working on a client project and you have some sort of expectations, or you want to be able to show them quicker wins, you might start at the bottom because you can show momentum earlier. And so, but if you have a longer time frame and it's your own personal project, or your client's chill, you can start here, and you can start at the most competitive.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And that's one on content optimization we kind of have answered. So what do you do with backlinks?
So this is one of those other SEO things that we've never had to learn because our projects just never stopped going up. We're able to take whatever backlink profile that the project has, and make it work. You know, whether it's a DR30, a DR33, you know, or DR55. Whatever you've accumulated going into the campaign and whatever you can accumulate during the campaign is just what we'll work with. You know, the strategy that we've used has helped a DR0 go from 0 to 100K a month. By the end of the year, you know, it was a DR9. That was an internal project, and we did do backlink building. So for internal projects, we'll build backlinks, but it's not a very sophisticated strategy. We do local citations. We do social profiles. You know, we go create a YouTube account and a Pinterest and Instagram, and then we hustle our friends. You know, a lot of people owe me favors, and I call those favors in. And that's it. You know, I think contentdistribution.com might have half a dozen backlinks that we've hustled from my network. But the strategy that I'm proposing doesn't rely on backlinks. You know, going back to one of the things that I didn't say earlier in the conversation is that, you know, my approach to Google focusing on publishing the highest quality content at scale, you know, really, I think it works because I believe that user engagement metrics heavily influence rankings. I think it's 2021. Google's the world's most innovative big data company. They own Chrome, Analytics, and Android. And it would be an oversight if they didn't use that proprietary data to inform them which pages are more valuable to users than other pages.
Yeah.
And from Google's perspective, you know, if you have two pages that you could show for a keyword and you're not sure which one you should show and which one's better for your readers, well, if this one has, you know, a 40% bounce rate, 10 minutes on site, and a 20% conversion rate, and this page has a 95% bounce rate, 4 seconds on site, and a 0% conversion rate, those are good metrics that tell you how users behave. And I think you can infer the reader value that's created, and I think Google does. So yeah,
makes sense.
You know,
makes sense. And I think, I mean, so it's very different when you work on a client side or when you work on an existing site that already have a decent DR and you know there is a bunch of links. I think that's a little different. I totally agree with you. If you have a brand new site, I think some kind of links or some kind of authority or some kind of stuff can definitely be very, very helpful, right? Because I'm not saying you can't rank without it. I think nowadays you can. I'm just saying like it will speed up the process significantly, right? We actually had a project recently in sort of the digital space, and it was very interesting because what we did, there's so many people who have podcasts, and what we found out on, for example, on Fiverr, that there's people selling like a commercial spot in their podcast for $20 or something.
Yeah.
So we literally went out and we found like 50 podcasts in like various channels where we could get a spot at $10-20 or something. And the main thing we were after was not actually the spot within the podcast, but we just wanted the link somewhere.
That's very clever.
And you know, like there is some creative way to get some relevant links and so on pages that are relevant, particularly just to, as you said initially, like definitely get all the social pages and some citations and stuff, but just getting something from, you know, relevant pages around you. So yeah.
Yeah,
Excellent.
absolutely. But I think, you know, it doesn't have to be super sophisticated. You know, you don't have to have this like really complex outreach infrastructure, you know, to be successful.
Yeah, makes sense. Right, Nick, I think we've been through a lot of questions and we're nearly hitting the hour now. So again, thank you very, very much for joining in, and very happy to have you here, and been very, very good session. If people again are desperately eager to reach out to you and get to know more about yourself or Cluster AI, what's the best places to go?
Yeah, go to contentdistribution.com. And you know, click one of our CTAs. You can get on our email list. You know, you can join our Facebook group, and you know, we give away everything that we've discussed on this podcast and more in detail: templates, resources, you know, step-by-step guides on contentdistribution.com.
Right, excellent. Thank you very, very much, Nick. That was fantastic.
Mods, I had a great time. Thank you so much for having me on.